Good evening from Bolifamba in Boya, chief town of the Southwest region. Welcome to the English newscast. The headlines. Contraband drugs worth 27 million francs CFA have been seized and set on fire in the east region of the country by custom authorities and law enforcement officers who are on an operation to fetch out illicit drugs and save the population from the consumption of these harmful medications. The ruling party in Tanzania has dismissed growing calls from its members of parliament for President John Magufuli to extend his term in office, as the 61-year-old president who won elections in October is currently serving his second and final 5-year term in office. The United Nations Security Council has called on Somalia's federal government and regional states on Tuesday to urgently resume talks and agree on arrangements to hold elections as soon as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all for the headlines. Stay tuned for the news in full. Good evening and welcome back. Contraband drugs worth 27 million francs CFA have been seized and set on fire in the eastern region of the country by custom authorities and law enforcement officers who are on an operation to fetch out illicit drugs and save the population from the consumption of this harmful medication. This report brings the details. Roadside drug selling is a very common phenomenon in Cameroon. It is a source of livelihood to some persons and families. But however, different unanswered questions still roam the minds of the conscious, even though some persons prefer buying these drugs. Where do these drugs come from? Are they legal and healthy for consumption? Are the vendors medical specialists? No one can tell. Most of the times, majority of these vendors are unaware of the prescriptions they give to patients, which is of course dangerous to their health. It does not only work against the illness, but medically it is advised that drugs taken for no reason are harmful and can even lead to death. The long and winding fight towards the reduction of contraband and counterfeiting of drugs continues in the four corners of the country, as Cameroonian customs as well as law enforcement forces are constantly on the go and scrupulously ensure the compliance of products entering the national territory. It is this work of permanent watch that enables Cameroonian customs and law enforcement forces in the eastern region of the country to get their hands on a large stock of unfit drugs last week. According to information relayed by the state media, the state stock of counterfeit drugs is estimated at 27 million francs CFA. According to the report, this major seizure was made in the towns of Bethwa, Garigombo and Garouabulai following a joint operation by the National Gendarmerie and Customs Services. Two types of seizures were made, the first by the Bethwa Mobile Brigade, which yielded close to 24 million francs CFA. The 2,700,000 francs CFA of medicines were seized by the custom post of Garigombo, according to Pauline Bello, head of customs of the eastern region. The illicit cargo was immediately set on fire in the presence of the governor of the eastern region, Gregor Mvongo. The first authority of the region of the rising sun then assured that the vigil will continue throughout the year. This to allow Cameroonians to consume quality medicine. According to Gregor Mvongo, the government is sparing no effort to make people understand that drugs are something serious that should not be bought on the sly. Onto the National Anti-Corruption Commission is firmly standing up by young people on the occasion of the 55th edition of the National Youth Day in Cameroon. The president of this public institution, the Reverend Dr. Dieudonné Massigams, proceeded yesterday, Tuesday, February 9, 2021, in Yoko, that's in the Mbam and Akim division in the central region of the country, the launch of the Youth Awareness Campaign. The objective is to instill in young people the values of integrity, honesty, and respect for public goods. More in this report. What does not belong to you, do not touch it. A very evocative theme to establish integrity, honesty, a sense of responsibility and respect for public goods in the minds of these rising youth. Thus, in adulthood, these young people can become active players in the fight against corruption, an evil that manifests itself mainly in the grabbing of what does not belong to us. An unavoidable challenge that the president of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, the Reverend Dr. Dieudonné Massigams, intends to take up. Thus, on the occasion of the 55th edition of the Youth Festival in Cameroon, CONAG launched the awareness campaign with the aim of promoting integrity among youth and instilling them with overriding values in order that the latter are not in the future the target of an operation carried out in Cameroon called the Operation Sparrowhawk, a vast judicial operation initiated in 2016 by the head of state Paul Biya as part of the fight against corruption in Cameroon. The city of Yoko in the Mbam and Kim Division Center region served as the setting for the official launch of this awareness campaign. It was during a ceremony chaired by the president of CONAC in the presence of local administrative, traditional and religious authorities. The institution intends to work to awaken students to the dangers to which they expose themselves by using the things of others or of the community. In other words, it's about training a new generation of upright citizens. Thus, those who will know on the one hand the difference between private and public affairs and on the other hand distinguish their salary from funds meant for the state. This national anti-corruption body, set up by the head of state by Presidential Decree number 2006/008 of March 11, 2006 and placed under his direct authority, has been carrying out for several years many awareness-raising activities to rid the country of the scourge that weighs on development efforts through communication actions. This initiative comes as corruption remains a worrying scourge in Cameroon. In its report on the Corruption Perception Index in 2020, published at the end of January 2021, Transparency International places our country at the 149th position out of a total of 180 countries, which makes Cameroon one of the most corrupt nations in the world. This ranking sufficiently shows Cameroon's inability to fight corruption effectively. In a press release published on January 29, 2021, Henry John Mangabel, the president of Transparency International Cameroon, noted that the approximate management of the coronavirus pandemic would not have enabled once again the institution to fight against corruption and the promotion of the ethics put in place by the government, that is to say, to ensure an adapted watch in the management of the pandemic and to respond effectively and efficiently to the needs of the populations. And still in Cameroon, the 4th edition of the Youth Parliament opened today, Tuesday at the Yaoundé Convention Center. This plenary sitting, which brought together young persons aged 25 and 35, was held in the presence of several members of the government. The questions of the young people addressed to them focus on the promotion of peace and sustainable development. This report brings the details. There were a total of 180 young deputies aged between 25 and 35 facing members of the government. It was within the framework of the 4th edition of the Youth Parliament that they came from the 10 regions of Cameroon, met on Tuesday, February 9, 2021 at the Convention Center in Yaoundé, Central region of the country. Under the leadership of the first Vice President of the National Assembly, Elarion Edong, the young deputies highlighted their concerns in relation to the voluntary engagement of young people for the promotion of peace and sustainable development. The question and answer session to these government members was one of the biggest articulations of the plenary sitting, an opportunity for the Minister of Employment and Vocational Training, Issa Chiruma Bakari, to recall the importance of training in an emerging country. His counterpart of the small and medium-sized enterprises, Achille Basiliki, reassured Cameroonian youths about the measures taken by the government to supervise young project leaders. The Minister of Secondary Education, Pauline Nalova Lyonga, called for a synergy of action to eradicate violence and drug use in schools. The Minister of Posts and Telecommunications, Mined Libomli Liken, warned Cameroonian youth against the misuse of social networks. For the Minister for the Promotion of Women and the Family, Marie-Thérèse Abena Ondoa, the protection of women and children in conflict zones is a priority for the government. The Minister of Youth and Civic Education, Mununa Fotso, invited young people to master the operating mechanisms of the structures for the supervision and support of young people. In addition, the young deputies wanted access to these structures to be free for young people who wish to acquire training, among other things. The coordinator of the Youth Parliamentarians Network, the Honorable Joshua Osi, asked young people to seize all opportunities in order to be the light of Cameroon for tomorrow. The Honorable Elarion Edong did not fail to remind everyone of the importance of these exchanges for the promotion of peace and sustainable development. The session ended with the graduation of the 180 young deputies. It should be remembered that junior deputies are chosen for a one-year term. Their role is not only to seek to know the initiatives undertaken by the government in favor of young Cameroonians, but also to allow the public authorities to better understand the aspirations of the youth. On to Tanzania, the ruling party in Tanzania has dismissed a growing calls from its members of parliament for President John Magufuli to extend his term in office, as the 61-year-old president who won elections in October 2020 is currently serving his second and final 5-year term in office. Humphrey Polepole, the CCM party's publicity secretary, has told the parliament that Mr. Magufuli has no intentions of remaining in power beyond his current constitutional mandate. Even though some ruling party members of parliament have been proposing the constitution to be changed to allow for a third term for him. During his first term in office, Mr. Magufuli had dismissed such proposals, saying he will not extend his mandate limit even by a minute. The United Nations Security Council called on Somalia's federal government and regional states on Tuesday to urgently resume talks and agree on arrangement to hold elections as soon as possible. A September agreement allowed for the president and others to stay in office after Monday's election date if needed, but United Nations Special Envoy and a representative, that's James Swan, has warned that going beyond that day brings an unpredictable political situation in a country where it is not necessary. After a close virtual briefing by Swan, council members issued a statement welcoming efforts by leaders of the government and a regional state to find agreement on implementing the September deal, but also expressing that concerns that talks ended without agreement on Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention. Another edition of the news is at 8 p.m. Stay tuned until tomorrow at 7 p.m. Have a blessed evening.